Many people believe the past leaves marks we carry without realizing it, and this idea gains even more traction when we talk about past lives. Dr. Ian Stevenson, a physician and researcher, dedicated decades to understanding why certain elderly individuals recalled events they hadn't experienced in this lifetime. He developed methods to test the authenticity of these memories, and many of his studies garnered attention precisely because they involved people over the age of 60. Initially, he wondered if these late emerging recollections were simply products of stories heard throughout a person's life. But gradually, he realized there was an impressive pattern. The accounts were accompanied by concrete details, and in some cases, information that could only be confirmed years later. This discovery opened up a field of study that continues to provoke debate even today. It's about this test and its implications that we will speak now, clearly and directly. Stevenson discovered that older adults were valuable witnesses because age brings a unique freedom to speak without fear of judgment. They reported unexpected memories upon hearing an old song, sensing a specific smell, or even visiting places for the first time. It was from this observation that he developed a test that became well known among scholars of the subject. In this video, we'll explain how he applied this method and why he believed the mind held more than we imagine. Please consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like, as this helps us bring more content like this that respects your intelligence and your curiosity. Our goal here is for you to understand what he did, step by step, without exaggeration or sensationalism, just the reality of the work that has influenced generations of researchers. The test began with simple questions, yet loaded with intention. Stevenson believed that how memory responds to the unexpected is more revealing than pre-formulated answers. Therefore, he used everyday objects, old photographs, and even maps to observe reactions. When an older person claimed to feel a deep connection to a place they had never visited, he recorded every detail. He wanted to know the color of a door, the sound of a street, or the feeling when describing an unfamiliar house. Often, these accounts matched real places that were only investigated later. It was a patient search for evidence that went beyond a vague memory and revealed how the mind can retain something that defies common explanation. Another part of the test involved dreams. Stevenson noticed that many older adults reported repetitive dreams with scenes that made no sense in their current lives. He asked them to describe these images and looked for patterns. If a woman dreamed of a village she didn't know, he investigated whether that place existed. And often he found impressive similarities. It wasn't about believing blindly, but about noting every fact and confronting the memory with reality. This careful approach made the test reliable in the eyes of those seeking answers without falling into fantasies. For the elderly, it was also a relief to share what they had kept silent for so long. The method also included a curious detail: the analysis of emotional reactions. Stevenson observed that when a memory from another life emerged, the body reacted differently. There were tremors, tears, or even unexpected smiles. This showed it wasn't just loose imagination. He asked volunteers to write down what they felt, to then compare with in-person interviews. This cross-referencing of information gave more consistency to the study and helped exclude the possibility of pure suggestion. It was almost like a map of the mind being drawn little by little, revealing memories that insisted on existing. Over the years, the test became a benchmark for serious researchers on the topic. Many tried to refute it, but ultimately realized that the methodology was too solid to be dismissed. The main strength of Stevenson's work lay in its simplicity. He didn't want to prove beliefs. He wanted to understand phenomena. This attracted older adults from various parts of the world who felt heard for the first time. Many reported that the test helped alleviate old anxieties and even understand fears they carried without knowing where they came from. This respectful approach allowed the study to endure for decades and still inspires new researchers to continue investigating the possible connections between lives. As Stevenson's work gained recognition, the accounts he collected showed a characteristic he himself hadn't expected. Most of the elderly weren't seeking fame or attention, and many didn't even want to be identified. They spoke because they felt a need to free themselves from something they had carried for decades. Some talked about memories that emerged suddenly, in simple moments of the day, such as looking at the sea or smelling freshly baked bread. These triggers revealed fragments of stories that seemed to come from another time. Stevenson recorded every detail with extreme care, noting the time, location, and even the tone of voice used by the participant. He believed that this respect for the account was fundamental, so that the study wouldn't be mistaken for something fantastical. As the years passed, the volume of information became so great that he needed a team to help organize everything. Among the most striking cases were accounts where the elderly described not only places, but also social roles they occupied in other lives. One man claimed to remember being a merchant in a distant port, while a woman spoke with rich detail about a small wooden school in a village that was only located years later. Stevenson didn't immediately accept these memories. He cross-referenced every piece of information with historical records, old maps, and even accounts from residents. If a participant claimed to remember a river near a city, he investigated the topography. This work required patience and an open mind, but always within scientific rigor. For him, credibility only existed if each piece of the puzzle was tested before being considered real evidence. One point that made Stevenson's test so special was the way he conducted conversations. He didn't pressure the elderly or suggest answers. On the contrary, he created an environment of trust, where each person felt comfortable speaking even if the memories seemed strange. This allowed the accounts to flow more naturally. Many affirmed that it was the first time someone listened without laughing, without doubting or judging. This sense of welcome was essential for the test to work, because delicate memories only emerge when the mind feels safe. Stevenson understood that age brings vulnerabilities, but also courage, and this allowed many stories to come to light without barriers. Another important aspect of the test was the comparison between accounts. Stevenson noticed that certain memories repeated themselves in different older adults who had never met. Places, names, and situations appeared more than once, as if coming from a common source. This drew attention, as it eliminated the hypothesis of individual invention. When three people described the same building, the same bridge, or the same square, he began a careful search for evidence. In some cases, he found ruins or records that confirmed the descriptions. This cross-referencing of information strengthened the study and attracted the attention of universities, which began to analyze the method with more respect, even though the subject was sensitive. The reactions of the elderly were also a constant point of analysis. Stevenson noted when someone became restless, when a timid smile appeared, or an unexpected tear. He understood that emotions are doorways to deep and often unconscious memories. Therefore, when an older person trembled while speaking of a place they had never visited, this became important data. He didn't treat these moments as absolute proofs, but as signals that deserved investigation. Instead of seeking immediate explanations, Stevenson gathered these clues until he formed a solid body of information. This care ensured that his work was seen as a serious study and not just another theory about past lives. Over time, Stevenson's test not only revealed possible memories of other lives, but also had an unexpected effect. It helped many older adults deal with emotional issues. Several participants reported feeling relief after sharing memories they had never told anyone. Some reported that after the test, old fears seemed to lose their power. One woman said that since childhood, she had a phobia of crossing bridges, but after describing an accident she experienced in another era, she was able to confront that fear. This showed that regardless of the final explanation about the origin of these memories, the method had a positive impact. It offered a way to understand sensations that seemed to have no explanation, bringing peace and understanding to those who carried doubts throughout a lifetime. As the studies deepened, Stevenson began to realize that the test could serve as a bridge between generations. Many older adults who participated shared stories with their children and grandchildren for the first time, revealing memories that had never been discussed. This created a profound emotional impact, as many families were surprised to hear such vivid descriptions of unfamiliar places. In some cases, relatives even traveled with the elderly person to the cited locations, just to confirm if the feeling of familiarity truly existed. There were accounts of people who cried upon stepping onto a street or touching a wall that somehow seemed to have been known before. Stevenson meticulously recorded these encounters, knowing they were unique moments where the present and past intermingled, bringing reflections on what we carry within ourselves throughout life. Another interesting aspect is that Stevenson never tried to convince anyone to believe in reincarnation. He remained faithful to his method, even if this frustrated those seeking quick answers. His stance was clear: investigate, document, and compare. This led to his work being respected even by skeptics, because he didn't force conclusions. If a memory described by an elderly person found no support in historical records, he left it open, without dismissing it, but also without affirming it. This scientific honesty made his tests a research model, showing that it's possible to explore sensitive topics with seriousness. To this day, his legacy is studied in universities as an example of how to conduct investigations involving deep human experiences without losing rigor and impartiality. The most impressive accounts came from older adults who, after the test, remembered languages they had never studied. There were cases where words emerged spontaneously, sometimes just one or two, other times entire phrases. Stevenson didn't treat this as a spectacle. He called in linguists to analyze the pronunciation, origin, and even the period in which that language might have been used. Some findings were so precise that they surprised experts. This fueled the idea that the mind can store information in ways we still don't understand. For the elderly, it was a mixture of strangeness and relief. Many said they felt more complete after understanding where that unexpected familiarity with words and expressions they had never formally learned came from. Stevenson also analyzed the physical effects that emerged after the test. In some older adults, symptoms like inexplicable pains or birthmarks gained new interpretations after accounts of previous lives. He recorded cases where memories linked to accidents, injuries, or illnesses seemed to be reflected in the current body. Once again, he didn't treat this as definitive proof, but as data worthy of investigation. He called in doctors to analyze the information and cross-reference the accounts with clinical reports. This careful approach helped avoid exaggerations and showed that the goal was to understand, not just to create curious narratives. This gave the test even greater weight in academic circles because it remained within the limits of what could be studied concretely. Over the years, the method became a tool used by other researchers, always crediting Stevenson's work. In different countries, scholars adapted the test to their cultures, but the essence remained the same: listening without judgment, investigating without rush, and recording with precision. For the elderly, this meant a rare space to speak of strange memories without fear of being called confused or imaginative. Many said they had never been taken so seriously. This created a bond of trust that spread beyond the research, showing that listening to the experiences of those who have lived longer can reveal not only memories of other lives, but also a wisdom that only age brings. Behind all this work was a central idea that the human being is more complex than we imagine. Stevenson didn't just seek to prove whether past lives exist, but to open doors to understanding how memory, emotion, and identity are formed. By applying his test to older adults, he showed that age doesn't limit the ability to explore what lies beyond the obvious. On the contrary, he believed that the years make the mind more open to deep memories, because the rush of the modern world no longer holds as much sway over those who have lived so long. This vision transformed his work into a legacy that spans decades and continues to inspire those who seek to understand what we hold in our minds and souls. Stevenson's test became more than a research tool. It evolved into a meeting point between science and personal reflection. It showed that aging doesn't mean losing the ability to discover, but rather gaining a calmer perspective to explore memories and feelings. For many older adults, participating in the study was a moment of liberation. They could talk about strange recollections without fear of judgment, and this made them feel that their life experience was valuable. In interviews, some said they finally understood why certain fears, preferences, or habits had accompanied them since youth. This sense of clarity provided a peace that is difficult to describe. Stevenson observed all of this naturally, noted every detail, and transformed these stories into data that could be studied by anyone willing to look at the human mind without prejudice. Among the accounts were examples that changed the participants' lives. One woman recounted that after the test, she decided to visit a village in the interior of the country mentioned in her memories. When she arrived there, she described streets and buildings that no longer existed, but which older residents confirmed had existed in the past. A man remembered a name and a profession that seemed nonsensical, until research showed that a merchant with that name had indeed lived in a distant region decades before he was born. These coincidences were rigorously documented, and what was most impressive was seeing the reactions of the elderly to these discoveries. Some cried, others laughed nervously, but all felt they were touching something profound within themselves, something that finally made sense. The scientific community, though divided, could not ignore the consistency of the method. Some critics tried to discredit the studies, saying it was all just imagination, but Stevenson always remained firm in the simplicity of his approach. He didn't claim to have all the answers. He simply presented the facts and let each person interpret them. This open stance attracted a broader audience, including those who didn't believe in reincarnation, but saw value in understanding how the mind creates or retains memories. For the elderly audience, this meant an opportunity to explore their own memories without fear of being labeled as confused. The test thus became an example of how listening to, investigating, and respecting each individual's story can reveal far more than we expect. Over time, accounts emerged of practical changes in the lives of those who participated. People who suffered from inexplicable fears began to confront them after understanding their potential origins. Others started having more peaceful dreams or looking at the future with less anxiety. Stevenson observed that for many, the test was not just a search for evidence, but a process of emotional healing. It didn't matter whether the participant believed in past lives or not. The simple act of being heard, of having their memories taken seriously, already had a powerful effect. This shows that in the end, Stevenson's work spoke as much about the human mind as it did about the importance of allowing each person to tell their story. Even after his passing, Stevenson's methods continue to be used, adapted, and studied. Researchers in different countries apply versions of the test to older adults, always remembering the importance of listening patiently and recording with rigor. His legacy proves that some questions don't need immediate answers to be valuable. They can simply open pathways for reflection. For those over 60, this is especially significant. Age brings the chance to look back and, at the same time, inward. The past life test he created is, in essence, a tool for this, an opportunity to understand a little more about who we were, who we are, and what we can still discover. If you are watching this video and are over 62 years old, perhaps you'll notice that certain memories and feelings take on a different weight now. Perhaps some unexplained recollection insists on appearing. What Stevenson's test teaches us is that these sensations deserve to be explored, not ignored. It doesn't matter if you believe in past lives or just want to understand more about the mind. The important thing is to allow yourself to reflect. If this content brought you value, please share the video and subscribe to the channel. This way, we continue together on this journey of knowledge, discovering step by step what science and life experience can reveal, even in the more mature phases of our journey.